Trustee Bland is here somewhere in the house. He'll probably be here shortly. Why don't we stand up and send the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
Which stands
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I guess we can do a quick introduction so that you know who's here at the table. We'll start with the representative over there.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Matt Hicks. I represent Merrimack County Work is East Concord.
Good morning, Senator Deborah Altshuler, District 24.
Good morning. I'm Rick Ladd. I come from Haverhill, New Hampshire, Grafton 5, Chair of House Education.
Number 4, the chair of this committee. The first thing here is the approval of minutes, but we don't have the minutes, so we can't approve them. That we approved at some future date. And what we have to do now is to discuss the yearly report that has been presented to you and written out with the appendices. So I'd like to find out if you read it and if you approve of the report as written.
Well, I just got it 20 minutes ago, so I'm not having an opportunity to read it.
So give it 5 minutes to read through it.
Sounds good, thank you.
It's very short. 2 pages.
I'm just checking on something, not aware, unless.
You have the report in front of you, do I have a motion to accept the report?
I have one question. I'm reading the report on the third page. At the bottom, where it states recommendations for legislative changes. Since initial passage in 2021, the legislature had considered several changes to EFA program, including both raising and eliminating the income eligibility thresholds, that's restricting EFA funds for religiously based non-public schools, and extending the phase-out grant provision. When we come to actually making the recommendations, no mention of recognizing the benefit that the religiously based non-public schools offer EFA participants, and I believe that should be continued. But there's no mention of that in our report.
See that second paragraph?
What kind of, are we talking about?
May not limit education funding from religious schools if they're available to non-religious schools.
To me, that is, it states we discussed it, but what was the outcome of our discussion? And I think that recommend that the EFA grants continue to support eligible EFA students at the, providing the opportunity for students to attend religiously based.
I don't know that we came to that conclusion, or that we voted on anything of the sort was discussed, but I think there was deep division on that.
We know that it was brought up by Representative Cordelli regarding Trinity Lutheran and Gonzalez cases, which the Supreme Court has said is okay, permissible. So I think that, given that information, we will continue the program as in place.
Well, while the U.S. Supreme Court ruling Trinity Lutheran, we may have determined that states may not limit education funding programs for religious schools. It does not make a value judgment about the benefit of such schools, and we have no data to suggest that it is of benefit. That's subjective. So I think that's not an appropriate assertion or assessment of religious schools.
disagreement is that there's situations where students are currently attending public education and which there's really no benefit in certain situations. And we said, yeah, an alternative to private schools, yes. What about the private or religious-based schools? I think it's, and again, I'll go back, but I believe the best determinant of that is the parent working with the student and working with the educators that have taught that student. So I just don't want to lock this out and make it assume, make that assumption by somebody reading this thing that we're questioning what we're doing. I'm not questioning that. I think we're on the right page.
So
We don't have any objective data to support that is of a benefit to that student. We have individual anecdotal reports from a minority of parents who took their children out of the public school system and then put them into a religious school environment, and we have no data on that. We can't back that up with anything, and respectfully, we know, because we have data, that 72% of the children using EFA programs never went to a public school. So we're only talking about a very small minority of children who left a public school to go to particularly a religious school, and we also have no idea whether they're doing any better or not in that religious school. We only have a handful, maybe, of parents, none of which we have on the record from this year, who have reported to a third party who then tells us anecdotal stories about people who are thrilled with their kids' religious education. And while that's great for them, I love those stories. It's just that. It's not data. It's a story. It's an anecdote, and we don't make policy on anecdote. So it may be great. There may be some parents who really think that sending their child to a particular religious school is a good decision for that family, and all the power to them. They've always had the right to do that. What we're talking about now is subsidizing that choice. And we don't have any data that says children pulled out of the public school, put into a private religious school, do better. We just don't have it because we have no measures on those private schools that receive the EFAs. We don't have any data to back that up.
Thank you, Senator Urshela. Now we have to go back to what our charge was.
Yes.
Still is. And I think that at the end, I think Senator Urshela, you're gonna have to write your own minority report. Because a lot of the issues that you are raising and adding onto the report is not something that we were charged to deal with. So I have your report here, and there will be written into a minority report. But in the meantime, I'd like to hear from Representative Ladd exactly what you wanted that sentence to say after.
Well, in looking at this, it says we entered into consideration of several changes, and one of those is religiously based non-public schools as being an option. And now I'm hearing that we have to have objective data. Well, we have students coming in from K1, 2, where there is no statewide assessment objective data. We're making decisions based upon social conditions, we're making discussions based upon parent information, we're making decisions that are based upon what is seen in terms of progress subjectively, or maybe it's somewhat in the developmental stages of a student, while they're in K through 12, what documentation, what's in their portfolio. So, I agree with you, Senator, that this was not to be part of the discussion of this group right here. It's leaving it here kind of unanswered. And as I see it, we've not made a decision one way or the other on this. And so it should be stated that the program continued to function as currently established by the Scholarship Association and DFA program.
So Representative, if we left that in,
Excuse me.
sorry, Madam Chair, yeah.
So that's what you want to add on to after the,
Well, I just want some clarification of some kind in there that, that the consideration didn't end up with us saying we're questioning this part of the program. We are coming to the conclusion that, as it states, back at it again, this is the first time I've looked at this, and consider several changes to the EAF program, including both raising and restricting EFA funds from religiously based non-public schools.
never talking
It
about.
was discussed, yes, I agree on that, but there was no recommendation made on that. I think there should be so stated in this report that no recommendation was made reference student participation in religiously based non-public schools.
Would, if I may, Madam Chair, would it be more appropriate to take that paragraph, since it's an initial passage in 2001, and move it across into page 2? Or are we on the cover page, page 1? So that or the first page of text, page 1. So just so we're making reference.
Is that going to change anything?
Yeah, so the page that begins with program overview at the top,
Yes.
would it be more appropriate to, taking Representative Ladd's comments in care to move that paragraph out of the recommendations, because it actually doesn't have a recommendation in it, and move it over to the program overview, since it is a statement. It is a statement of fact, and it is an overview of, it is part of the overview of the program, that one paragraph. Wouldn't that be a better place for it? It doesn't make a recommendation.
Representative, do you have any thoughts on it?
I have thoughts on the data, I don't have thoughts on the wording of this stuff.
Does that make sense?
Program overview is an overview of just that, what we've heard, and what is part of the EFE program now. If we're going to take that out, and I think it's a good idea to lift this out of the air underneath the title recommendations for legislative changes, because there's no recommendation referencing this in that section. Impact of state education funding to local school districts. Somewhere along the way, I'd have to read this a little bit more thoroughly, and like Representative Hicks said, I kind of assume that you're saying that there's, maybe this is the first time you've seen it too, and that maybe there ought to be a section where some of the discussion that occurred regarding the EFA program, we talked about, phase outs, yes, we talked about this topic right here. And we also looked at a number of providers and programming that is provided through the EFA program. In the third paragraph up there under the program review, it says EFA funds administered through a scholarship organization could be used in a number of ways, including, and I would say not, but not limited to, tuition at non-public schools. And then you could slip in the, the issue that we addressed right here with the religiously based non-public schools, and maybe a sense following that the committee had discussion on this and has not made, or they did not make recommendations on that.
So to
I'm
honor
surprised
that,
to put it in.
to honor that, we could, because there are footnotes and references throughout, perhaps the minutes are all attached from our year. We could reference the meeting date of those,
Sure.
where those discussions were.
I'm open to that.
Yeah, so that it's clear what we're talking about.
Yeah, we could reference the minutes.
Yeah, so we would need to just take a little with specific discussions and then, you know, put a.
There were several meetings in which we did that.
Yeah, we did, so, you know, but, agreed.
So where do we stand right now with the,
I think we're moving that over,
so that whole paragraph?
just this one, this paragraph. This one, yep, over to the program overview. And adding footnotes to reference the exact meeting dates where we had those specific discussions. So we just gotta go through those. But fortunately, we have really good, we have really good minutes. Representative Hayes. Thank you.
Not for last meeting, but.
Well, I mean, I know they're coming. Going back to the program overview, and I just want to acknowledge that I did provide the committee members with some proposals of things to add. I did not write this specifically as a minority report, because I'm hoping that we will be producing a report. So as we move forward in this discussion, I want to offer my suggestions to the report that we were just given today. And then if there are some places where we cannot come to agreement, then perhaps a minority report is in order. But for the purposes of today's discussion, I would like to participate, you know, as we're writing a full report from the committee. That said, in the program overview, I would suggest an addition of the words low income onto line 2. So we read in 2001, no, I think it should be 21. First of all, that should be 21. 2021, the New Hampshire General Court approved the Education Freedom Fund program, a scholarship program by which low-income New Hampshire families would be empowered to use the state's per pupil adequate education grant in a matter of their choosing to open alternate educational avenues for their child.
So you want low income to benefit them?
Yes, and I would like to replace the best educational options with to open alternative educational avenues for their child.
Well, that's interesting because if you're choosing something, obviously you must have something to choose from.
Right.
And it seems to me that you have alternative options and that's what you're looking at.
Well, right, we're opening more options. There's 3 options already. We're adding in another. We're adding in a 4th state support option with the EFA.
Take this down.
I'm getting most of it.
Okay.
Rest of it,
I have a few further concern here with that language that we currently, since its initial passage in 2021, yes. The legislature had considered, or the Oversight Committee has discussed or considered several components of the program, including both written and then stating that. Was it the legislature or this committee?
Well, as a program overview,
I'm talking
yeah.
underneath that one paragraph there, that's in the recommendations for legislative changes.
but we moved that over to the
By
first page.
moving out though, yes,
Yeah.
I'm still saying, has the legislature been considering this, or has it been the oversight committee of the legislature considering this?
Okay, so I see where you're going with that. Perhaps to be fully accurate, we could say the legislature considered that is true, and the oversight committee discussed. In fact, when we go back to the 2023 report, the legislature actually took up some of the recommendations saying that considered several changes, that is accurate. We did, the legislature did try to address some of the recommendations from the 2023 report. So, accurately, the legislature has considered several changes, and the Oversight Committee has reviewed the program, which is statutorily correct.
I'm going back to the charge that this committee has.
Yes.
And it seems to me that it should be fairly straightforward. I don't think we need to make it very complicated and include all kinds of things in this that we don't have to. The committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194-F, including the impact of state education funding to local district schools, and make recommendations for any legislative changes to the Education Freedom Savings Accounts program. It seems to me we're going into the weeds with including all kinds of things that we really not charged to do. And we can go on forever to make a very sophisticated, inclusive report that has much more than what we charge with to provide. And if we're haggling over the construction of sentences, we're never going to get done here today.
Well, with all due respect, Madam Chair, that's what we're supposed to be doing today. And I was here when we did this for the 2023 report, but sitting in one of those chairs. So the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194F.
Right.
That is our first task. So we're monitoring the entire 194F. And including, so that's additional, including, make sure you don't forget, that's including the impact of state education funding to local districts. It's not exclusive, it's including. So we do have to look at the whole thing. And in last year's report, it really was pretty comprehensive, similar to what has been proposed here today. So I don't know that we're off track. I'm looking at, I have last year's report here. And as a matter of fact, it's a lot, there's a lot more in last year's report than this one. So I think we're on track to meet our charge and be as thorough so that when the next committee reads our report, they know what it is we did and talked about and what was our concerns and focuses. I don't know that it's that weedy, but that was kind of our job, was to get into the weeds, The committee is monitoring the implementation of this.
Okay, let's take it from the beginning here. We have a program overview.
All right.
We have paragraph number 1.
Yes.
And to that, you want to add the first paragraph on recommendations. Move that over to program overview
With change.
with additional references to the meeting minutes that,
Since its initial passage in 2021, the legislature and the Oversight Committee have monitored the impact of the EFA program.
the legislature with the oversight committee or the
Well,
oversight?
there's been legislative bills that come forward, there's also been discussion on that.
Mhm.
The Oversight Committee has also addressed those same issues in this group right here. So I would say since initial passage in 2021, the legislature and the Oversight Committee for the committees has monitored the impact, discussed the impact, or considered either way, monitored, considered the impact of the EFA program, including both raising and eliminating the income eligibility thresholds, yes, and restricting EFA, that's going to the negative right off. The use of EFA funds for religiously based non-public schools, that's what we did, the use. And going on, and then I think it could.
We did have a discussion about restricting EFA funds. In fact, we had a robust discussion about it, I think, in the last meeting. So, it's it's not a value judgment, it's a statement of what we did. So, you know, the legislature and the EFA Oversight Committee have discussed the EFA program, including both raising and eliminating the income eligibility thresholds. I mean, also the legislature considered reducing it, but we're not including that. Restricting EFA funds from religiously based non-public schools and extending phase-out grant provision. All those are true statements. If it's a negative, if it comes off as a negative, then we should be more neutral. You know, because
But then
it's what we did. We actually did those things. So just, you know.
We did it from two perspectives. We did it from the perspective you're coming across, restricting or stopping. And then there was the other discussion of using them, which is the opposite. So I'm not going to support it if we're going to put the word restricting in there.
I think that putting restricting the use of EFA funds
Okay.
is, I think is
Okay.
appropriate.
Okay, if you have use in there.
The use of EFA funds.
Or would you be comfortable with the word regulate?
Instead of restricting?
Sure. That is a more neutral term because we did talk about regulating and that can be attributed from both perspectives.
I would,
Does that work?
regulating the use of, or yes, I would support that.
All right, awesome. So we're gonna take out restricting, insert regulating, but we're still moving this paragraph to the first page.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, okay, great. So it will now read, since its initial passage in 2021, the legislature and the Oversight Committee have monitored, discussed, and considered several changes
And
to the,
monitored, discussed,
and
and the impacts? Or-
considered, so.
I was trying to use the language that Ruth had said, or Senator had said as our mandate.
Yeah.
I believe monitoring impact is part
So
of that.
take out several changes and put the word impact, consider
Yeah,
impacts.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
works. All right, great. So that stays, that gives fidelity to the charge. Impact to the EFA program, including both raising and eliminating the income eligibility thresholds, regulating EFA funds from religiously based non-public schools, and extending the phase-out grant provision. So, that's where we are so far in the first, that paragraph for the first section. But I would, I have an add-on to
You
that.
still want to have the references to the meeting minutes that support the.
Yes,
Okay.
as a footnote, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to put a little asterisk for footnote. Okay. So, on page 2, actually page 3 of the memo that I brought in, I would like to add to the program overview, and I'm open to discussing rewriting the language. My paragraph reads, due to a lack of required student performance for the program, we do not have aggregate information as to how the students in the program are performing using accepted statewide academic assessments for measured progress toward mastering any competencies that are considered part of an adequate education as defined by the legislature. So, that is what I just mentioned at the beginning. We don't have that aggregate data, we don't have a unit of measure, and that is something that we are lacking and does fall under the implementation, is that we're not assessing the efficacy of the implementation because we don't have any assessment tools. So,
I don't know if that's,
this is the paragraph, this is the paragraph that I would like to add to the program overview.
one of the changes, I'm not saying I agree with this paragraph, but one of the changes where you have in the third line are performing using accepted statewide academic assessments where appropriate. There are no statewide assessments for grades K, 1, 2.
Okay, so, and thank you for catching that. So would you be open to a parenthesis there for acknowledging there is no statewide assessment for grades K through 2? We can bifurcate the one K through 2 from 3 through 12.
But the thing is that I don't think we're supposed to make that assessment. We're not looking
Monitoring
at
the
this,
implementation of the program.
implementation of the program, how
Yes.
well it is working for the students. But now you're saying that we need aggregating from how the students in this, who are using the EFAs, how they are progressing or performing in the schools.
What I'm saying is that children who are students who are using EFAs towards their educational experiences do not have any measure of mastering competencies that are considered part of an adequate education as defined by the legislature. So we have a defined adequate education. We are taking the adequacy money and we are putting it into an EFA account. And then the parents are making choices about how to use that adequacy to give their children ostensibly an adequate education. But we don't measure whether that is actually happening. So that's what I'm saying, is that there isn't a measure right now. This committee has not been able to come up with, like, what does that look like? We talked about it, like, I think we talk about it at every meeting, but we still don't have that. And I think that's worth acknowledging that that is a challenge that we have in the committee in overseeing this program. There is a gap on one side, there's 3 state-funded opportunities, educational opportunities, all of which have adequate education folded into their requirements. And then the 4th, which is EFAs, does not have requirements for adequate education. And that's something that we talked about. And I just like to put that in the overview that we've discussed this. And we haven't come up with any solutions of, how to justify that.
The way I see it is that EFA is not a program on its own. The kids who are using the EFA money to go somewhere else are in a school where the kids in that school are assessed on a regular basis.
No, they're not. They're not. Some of them are, and we don't know what those are. Some kids go to, independent schools, some go to religious schools, some homeschool, some go to, very interesting curriculum-based schools from, there are schools and pods that accept this money that do not have a set curriculum. We know this to be true because they're on the approved list of vendors. We have schools that are not teaching to the standards of some very, very highly respected private independent schools. They're not all teaching to the same standards. They don't have to meet the state curriculum. Some of them overlap and do, and that's great, good for them. But that is not the norm, nor is it required. And that's what I'm suggesting, is that we acknowledge that the adequacy money going into the EFA accounts for adequate education is undefined in that realm. It's defined over here with brick and mortar schools and charter public schools and VLACs. Over here with EFAs, the wide variety of applications for EFAs take out the adequacy definition because there is no measure and there's no requirement to measure, and we don't know. This goes into what we talked about with the high school graduation requirements. It's just unknown. So it's an unknown, that's all.
I think that what you are proposing is for each individual child that uses EFA, we have to set up a special program, finding out how they are taught, what they are learning, and we have at the end, we're gonna have some aggregate data that we can use. It seems to me that you're taking away, you're separating any child who uses extra money to go somewhere else where they're happier, where they can learn better, where they're better suited to work in the school environment. You're taking that out. You're separating any child who uses EFAs, say that they are different, and we need to follow them differently. We need to do something special. Because we don't know if they're learning anything at all. And I think based on anecdotal evidence, I think what we have heard is that parents are making the choice, and most of the parents who have gone to a different school are happy about the change. And I don't know how much more we can do, except making sure that they are learning, and you want to have something in addition. You want to have, single them out and checking out exactly where they are, how much they're learning, testing them in a different way. And I just don't think that's discrimination as far as I'm concerned.
Well, this paragraph doesn't make any of those value judgments. Actually, all it says is part of the program overview that we don't have required student performance. We don't have aggregate information. We don't have a way to gather aggregate information. And because of that, we're not measuring. I am not proposing a form of measurement in this paragraph. I am making a statement of fact that there is an adequate education as defined by the legislature, and students who are involved with the EFA program are not required to meet those requirements of an adequate education, and we don't measure it. And that's it. It's a statement of fact. Those kids are not required to meet the threshold of adequate education as defined by the legislature. Now,
Well, I
we
don't,
can talk about, many of them
May-
do,
may I-
but many of them don't, and it's all anecdotal. It's all anecdotal.
okay, Representative Black.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the statute right now. And you said there's no accountability. There is accountability.
Where is that?
A, having the student take a nationally standardized norm reference achievement test and provide the results in the scholarship organization by the end of the school year, to the scholarship organization by the end of the year, which the scholarship organization shall make available to the department as aggregate scores, or having the student take the statewide student assessment test pursuant to. So you have a norm reference test, national norm reference test, you have the statewide assessment, and C, maintaining a portfolio, including but not limited to, and it goes through a log and all that, and it mentions the certified teacher. So there is a process in place. Now, whether we're receiving this information, that's a different issue. But there is a process in place, which they are required to do. So I think we're in error for saying that there's no way to determine whether they're meeting these competencies or not.
Well, we don't have the aggregate information. It may be being collected, but neither you, nor I, nor this committee has that information. That is all I have put in the program overview paragraph, is that we don't have this information. And I agree with you that there should be an acknowledgement that there is not a normed measure for K through 2. There are for 3 through 12, and bifurcating them, totally fine. We can totally do that. But acknowledging that we just don't have that information. If it exists, awesome. Maybe we put that in the recommendations that we get that information in a more digestible way or quickly.
Well,
I don't care. That's not
You
what
can
I'm
put that in the
talking about.
recommendations, that if there's data available, we would like to have it.
Right, but acknowledging in the program overview that this committee doesn't have it, that there, if this is being gathered, we have not seen it, and we do not know if there is measured progress toward mastering any competencies that are considered part of adequate education as defined by the legislature.
I can read it, I have read it.
Yeah,
But
so that's
seems
it, it's not,
There's a much stronger statement than just saying, we don't have all the data that may be available, and there might be a recommendation that we should have it.
I just said we don't have
That's
adequate
right, but
information,
then
that's
they said,
all.
due to lack of required student performance for the program, we do not have the information.
Take
How
that
the
first
students-
sentence, I'm cool, take out due to lack of performance, that's not a
And
problem. I'm great.
with this data, I think that
Cut
it
it
has to have it, but I think
Sure.
to say that there isn't any data because we don't know how these kids are performing, and
Okay.
they are presumably
Okay,
not performing very well, is how I get it.
okay, so,
Okay?
acknowledged, heard, how about starting the paragraph with, the committee does not have
So
adequate.
where do you want this thing?
This is right, right here.
Yeah, I know, I see
Cutting
that.
this out altogether, coming out, replacing the word we with the committee. And putting it in program overview.
Madam Chair, I asked the question, is this EFA report proposal a minority report, or is it the majority report? If it's a minority report, I can recall writing a minority report when we looked at the education funding formula years ago on the Umberger report. And so it was a separate report attached to the report of the committee. This is a minority report. I don't think there's any need to get into discussion on it. This is just from the minority.
I'm proposing this to be part, so that the committee might come to, a unanimous decision about how do we want to put our work forward. I did not write this as a minority report. I brought in a memo to have concrete, written down information to put into the overall report. That was not my intention, was not to come to you with a ready-made minority report. In good faith, with fidelity to our charge, I brought forward context for the report.
Well, I think we
That
have
was
made,
not included on this
I made
document,
a couple
so.
of changes here already, and I think that there are some things that we can go and probably discuss ad nauseam, very specific little things, and go into the weeds about all of these things. But as far as I'm concerned, the report with the few changes that we have already made, I think it is a good report that addresses the charge that we have. And I would suggest that you write a minority report on all the specific little things that you would like to have in there, because it's obvious that you have some very specific interest in this and you would like to have it mentioned. And I do think that any future committee will read the report in the minority report, because will be included together with it. Yes.
Madam Chair, would it be okay if we ask the scholarship organization, which is present today, do they have this information on the norm reference test or the statewide assessment or the number they're doing the portfolio and how they're using that information towards, improving the program or assessing what we're doing?
You can ask Mrs. Sutherland.
Yeah.
Would you come up here, Mrs. Sutherland?
I'm sorry?
Could you come up here and answer that question that Representative Land just posed?
So we are required by law to collect that information, and we make that information available to the department. And then what they do with that is up to them.
You said to the department, I didn't quite hear you.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So we make that information available to the department.
All the assessments.
That aggregated information.
Okay. So what we need to do is to be sure that we get that from the department. Right?
The person who makes that decision.
For the recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So also had years of claims that the EFA program has been both popular and successful. I think I mentioned this very briefly, I don't say much. What does that mean? Like popularity, what is it? Because this is characterizing this program perhaps accurately, but perhaps not. How do we know that it's popular? Just by the increase in enrollment? What rate of increase in enrollment would we have to see to determine if it's popular or not? And more than that, successful, are people just satisfied with their lives joining the program, or are they satisfied with the educational attainment? We don't know. We don't know how to define success in this program other than what occurred and written down in the notes, which is enrollment. Right? So if enrollment increases in the program, does that mean it's successful? Does that mean that it's popular? Or must there be another way to measure that? And that's a concern that keeps coming back. I would love to see objective data, and if that data showed me that students in this program are growing academically, then great. Then there's some data, we have something objective to look at, saying 90% of students who are part of the EFA program are growing faster than their peers who are not in the program. Or it says something different, and then we need to potentially address that. So right now, I don't have clarity other than customer satisfaction.
Thank you. When we're looking at K-12 public education, we have, in accordance with the federal law, various indicators of whether we're providing the opportunity for an adequate education, or whether we're delivering. Some of those indicators are such that, what's your suspension expulsion rate, what's your attendance rate, what's your number of kids participating in concurrent dual enrollment, what's the participation rate in terms of going off to CTE and onto a pathway career, how many take the ASVAB and go off into the service, how many go to post-secondary education. This program we have here, the EFA program, is relatively a young program in terms of the state of New Hampshire. And I don't know if we've gotten to that point yet where we have the aggregated data or the information to provide us some of where we are with these particular indicators. But I too would like to see, how students are doing. I know there's a number of students in public education as well as in the EFA program that are children that have either IEPs or special needs, 504 needs, and there are exceptions that, you cannot always measure something through a statistical report and not, how do you measure satisfaction? How do you measure the child is not, is staying in school and not dropping out due to some kind of an emotional issue that may have occurred at school? So I feel it's a young program. I'd like to move so we have some of those indicators in place that we can do this. I don't know if we have that information available now or not. I haven't seen it.
Do you have anything?
The program's pretty young, and if you take data just from 1 year or 2 years, it might be not really conveying the story you want to hear or know. It may not be.
But this is the 4th year, it's
Yeah.
Senator Warren, have we ever received any of that data? Time I've been on this committee, we have not, from the DOE. And I think that's problematic. Oftentimes when we talk to children with scholarship, I know the DOE, we got into this. And I'd like to see, I'd like to have that information. potentially put to rest some of the concerns that we have.
There's some of this stuff here, okay.
How many students are in high school in the EFA program versus those which are in the middle or lower grades? And some of those indicators I just mentioned are high school type driven indicators. Again, we have the scholarship organization here. I'd be curious to know how many students are really at that high school level where they're starting to see what's going on their graduation, on their attaining a ISET or whatever they're going to try to go for.
Yeah, we talked about that at the last meeting, that we don't measure what graduation means. People just age out of the program. We don't track what they did in their so-called senior year or what they do afterwards. We have that data from our high schools and charter schools and VLAX because we keep track of it because we spend our money on it, but we don't have anything. We don't know. That's not tracked. And if it is tracked, we're certainly not apprised of it. So it sounds like that would be a good recommendation, is that tracking of post-graduation, and I put that in parentheses in quotation marks.
You mean what they're doing after high school, whether they're.
That's what
college?
Representative Left
Right.
asked, yeah.
Um,
You know, are they prepared? And what are they prepared for? These are things we measure on public schools, in charter schools, and in VLAX. We measure that. There are requirements that the legislature has put in place for adequate education and graduation requirements. There isn't any with EFX. So we don't measure, we don't have data. Perhaps, based on Representative Ladd's comments, that is something we can add to the recommendations for legislative changes, is gathering that information.
Mr. Southerton, do we know how many high school students we have with the EFA? And is that listed?
I can get that for you. And it actually sounds like, so the ETC law has a requirement that we conduct a survey of students annually. It sounds like that might also be something that you want us to do, or consider adding that to the law as well.
But I know as it is right now, there are kids who graduate and they have their certificate of graduation. And then there are those who have not fulfilled the requirements and then don't get the certificate. And eventually, maybe later on, they might get their work on the program and get their CD later on, sometime as adults. So should that be one of our recommendations? That we have, that we know how many EFA students in different grade levels? And if they are in high school, what do they do after high school?
Do they meet the legislatively prescriptive graduation requirements upon their exiting the program?
Well, I'm hoping that if you graduate from any kind of school, that you have fulfilled that school's graduation requirements. Whether they are in another high school, private school, religious school, non-religious school, because in order to graduate, as far as I understand it, you can't just graduate with F's everywhere.
Not
You
every-
have to have reached a certain level of understanding of the subject matters that you have gone through.
Well, I mean, were that the case, we would probably be having very different discussions. The fact of the matter is that different schools have different requirements. And New Hampshire has set about constructing a graduation requirement for public school kids who attend our brick and mortar schools, our charter public schools, and VLACs. Once they leave that program and they then go into the publicly funded program of EFAs, those requirements are no longer applicable because each of those schools do different things, and they are not, at this point, required to submit what their requirements are to the state of New Hampshire. We have no idea. And we also have a number of students who are engaged in homeschool activities, and we have no idea if they are graduating or if they are aging out of the program with any discernible skills. We don't know. We don't go to the private religious schools and say to them, give us your curriculum. We want to make sure that it's in line with the New Hampshire state curriculum because they have the freedom to educate the way they want to. The difference is that now we're paying for it. And we have no say, we have no oversight, we don't even have a look in. We don't even have a look. It's just, we trust you, do your thing, and if the kids graduate, with a civics education, all the better. But we know that, public school kids have to do this. Public school kids have to take so many credits of English. Public school kids have to take so many credits of math. We don't do that on the other side. That's what we're talking about right now, is that we don't monitor or ask for that information, so we don't know.
So let's ask for that information. Representative Black?
Yeah, I think we're getting way off course here. And, I believe that the private schools that are in business in the state are approved by DOE. I also know that we have what we call a Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission. And that commission is tagged with responsibilities, making recommendations about implementing, administering, and improving the EFA program. And that was, we discussed this advisory commission, the Parent Advisory Commission, a number of times here. And in regard to it, because it's such in statute, public can attend those meetings, they've got to be properly posted. We don't have any information about this really, other than that it works closely with the director and folks at the scholarship organization. But I think that that's where we should be tagging some of this in. When you're doing the survey work, they have a responsibility for overseeing this as well. And is it being done? What are they making recommendations on? Have they looked at how to maybe better implement the program, or to administer the program, or improve that program? Before we start doing this, shouldn't that commission that's been established by statute be doing some of this also?
Sure, why not?
Well, we had, the last time Ms. Baker-Demers attended a meeting, and that was many months ago, we talked about the Parent Education Service Provider Advisory Commission. And at that time, the commission had not been coalesced, the commission had not come to any meetings, the commission did not have any agendas, and Ms. Baker-Demers said that it was her opinion in the reading of the chapter that their purpose was only, as stated in 194F semicolon 5 part 3, the scholarship organization may request the commission to meet in person or virtually to review appeals of education service provider denials pursuant to RSA 194F4, and to provide a recommendation to the scholarship organization as to whether an education service provider should be allowed to receive or continue receiving payments. It was her reading that said, I've never convened this committee because we've never had anything, not had any appeals. And so there was no impetus to form the committee. Now, has the committee been formed? I don't know. Have they met? Also don't know. But we do know that the EFA executive director's reading of it is that it's only to come together to talk about appeals. And so if your suggestion is that we add into section 194F5, that would be in our purview and have fidelity to our charge to increase the responsibility of the Parent Education Service Provider Advisory Commission. And the sidebar, it is just advisory, but that's, that's their charge right now. And I think I do have a recommendation that they meet. Where's that?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
that commission is tagged with responsibility to deal with appeals, and the scholarship organization may request dealing with the appeal process. But on Roman 1 under that section, it says specifically, advisory commission to assist scholarship organizations by providing recommendations about implementing, administering, and improving EFA program. They're tagged with doing that.
Yes.
That's the Roman 1, Roman 3 is dealing with the appeal process, but Roman 1 is, I haven't seen any reports coming forth from that commission. And I believe that if we ask for those, we should see the minutes, we should see those reports. And so,
Sure.
I wouldn't mind seeing a recommendation. In fact, I spoke about this, I believe, when we were talking about it way back then, that I think the commission has to be used by the scholarship organization in a way that is going to do those 3 charges.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be just an occasional meeting when somebody decides to have one.
So on page 1 of my memo, I did, point that out that they have not met, despite their statutory requirement mandating them to meet. We have not received any list of members. We have not been told that they exist. And at the last time we spoke with the executive director, she had not convened this group. So,
I can't recall hearing that there are no members on this. Perhaps I can get some clarification from Matt right now. In fact, what is the status of that? How are meetings being noticed to the public? What are the minutes kept? Are the recommendations that come out of that? I think it's important for us to find out.
So that committee met on.
Could you go up to the microphone,
Oh,
please?
sure. Okay, so the members of the committee are all publicly available. You can find them all in there and have them on our website. The committee met, I believe it was on 10/23/24 to hear 2 appeals from parents. Both of those appeals were adjudicated and denied. I'm sorry, what were the other questions?
So it doesn't go any deeper than that. We see Roman 3 where the appeal process.
Right.
In Roman 1, it's not a committee, it's a commission. Does that commission meet to assist your organization in terms of making recommendations for these 3 component administration, implementing the program?
So that was the first official meeting of the commission, but the commission, I have found them personally to be very helpful. They're all school leaders and they're either school leaders or parents, and I think that they've been very helpful in identifying communication issues, how we can be better, working with parents, working with the education service providers, etc. So I think that they have valuable input personally.
So could those minutes be available to us?
So we contacted the department on, I believe it was 9/30/24, because we were uncertain whether or not this actually was a public advisory commission or not. The department responded on 10/7/24 and advised us to speak with our attorneys. Our attorneys advised us that it was not a public meeting. And I believe that we also have this question in the AG's office currently. And we've not yet received a response.
You said
So
that-
yes, we did take
Okay.
minutes. And
But we can
whether
say-
whether it's public or not public, we would just go into, obviously, we just go into non-public session if we have student PI.
You mentioned that the Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission is on the website as to their membership.
Yeah, so it's in the parent handbook at the minimum.
Okay, because when I'm on your website and I plugged in Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission, it says no results found. So where would it?
Go to the parent handbook,
Parent handbook.
go to the parent handbook, and you'll find the membership there.
Okay, well, maybe you'll have to walk me through using your site, because when I type in parent handbook, I just come up with December 2022, December 16th of 2022 and December 15th of 2022
So,
as,
yeah,
yeah, so I
go to
don't,
the EFA
I'm just
program.
typing in,
On the right side, there's a
little,
list of all available resources. Click on parent handbook, open parent handbook, and you can see.
it's a little difficult to find, but, okay. So they meet, but we can't see the minutes, and it wasn't publicly noticed. So do parents who participate in the EFA program get notification that this Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Committee is meeting?
They did. The two different parents submitted appeals. Those were the first two appeals that we've received during the duration of this program. Again, they used the internal appeal process, then they escalated it to the external appeal process to that commission. Their appeals were heard and they were denied.
I'm sorry, I think I didn't make my question clear. I was asking if parents who receive EFA scholarships for their students are apprised that the Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission is meeting, not necessarily ones who are put forward an appeal, but the general population of EFA parents.
Do we notice to them when a meeting is
Right.
scheduled? No, we do not.
So they're not public meetings. Okay.
Not that
Okay.
I mean, that's what the attorneys have told us.
So Senator Jill, are you suggesting that the parents of these EFA kids should be notified of the meeting?
I didn't suggest, I'm just asking questions because this is the first we're hearing that this commission has actually met and looking for clarification because it sounds like this Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission, while statutorily mandated to meet, also somehow has a veil of confidentiality over it that was, I don't know whether that was the intention when this was formulated, that they not be a public meeting. And I'm just looking to find out who's going, who called it, and what happened while they were there, and it sounds like I see who's there. We have representatives from Hillsborough, Sullivan, Coas, Belknap, and Stratford County, which meets the statutory requirement of 4 counties, or no fewer 94 counties.
But again, that's sort of an interesting side.
Yeah, just,
to this whole thing.
we're learning.
It's not part of the report. It does not have to be part of this report.
Well-
It is on the side.
No, my suggestion for the report is that, perhaps a requirement under our recommendations that this commission be made public.
Well, I think we can recommend that we get the information from this particular thing. I don't think it's not part of what we are doing here, is to tell whether or not there should be a public meeting or not. I think we're getting way off, and I really think we're just going way out in the weeds. And a lot of things that are very interesting, it'll be fun and interesting and great to know about, but it's not what we are dealing with right now. We're dealing with a charge for this committee,
Right.
and what you're suggesting right now, I think it's a nice thing to know. And I have need to knows and nice to knows.
And
That is not part
in the
of what.
statute, this is in the statute, it's not just a nice to know, it's statutorily required. And
Yes.
statutorily, there is an oversight
Yes,
in this public law that says this entity operates outside of the purview of the public. And perhaps, I'm suggesting, that's an oversight. And one of our charges is to make recommendations to changing and tightening up the law. So I'm
Yeah.
suggesting that it's not in the weeds.
Of the EFA. Again, I have to say, I think we're going way off here. Maybe we'd like to change what this committee, committee should be doing. But as of right now, we have our charge, and we
Yes.
have addressed the charge, and I think the other things could be either in a minority report, an additional report that could be part of it, on its a separate report, but connected with the report, so that people in the future, if they want to read it, can see exactly what has been discussed and what some of their concerns are. But for right now, I think that we have a report, we have made some changes, and that is addressing what our charge is. If the charge is going to be different, then the legislator has to come up with something, what else they like to know.
So that I'm clear, just so I understand what it is you are saying. Under chapter 194F, the Legislative Oversight Committee established. Our charge, the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194F. And in section 194F5, we have discovered that there is a lack of access. We are unable to find out what this part of the statute, the people who are supposedly executing section 194F5, that they are doing this with confidentiality that is not stated in the statute, and that we, as a committee, are not curious or interested in asking for a legislative change to bring that out into the open. That is our charge, to oversee the implementation of RSA 194F. I'm suggesting we make a change to 5, and it's my understanding that is not something that you are open to, correct?
I think that probably what we should do is to finish up this report for this year. Then we can get together and we can go through the whole 193:F and take it bit by bit and see what we need to do. That's going to take quite some time because it's a big chapter. For right now, we're looking into the assessment of the EFA, how it's progressing and how it's doing, how many kids are in it, and what the impact is on the public schools. And I think we have addressed that in this report. And I would like to see this report being finished and go out by November 30th. If we
Yes.
if we decide that we really need to look at the whole chapter, then we can set aside sometime, and we just go through it one by one. And then we can address this commission, and everything else, anything else that's in that particular chapter.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you. You're saying that the committee shall, the stated purpose, the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194F excludes portions of 194F, that you don't want to look at each of them. I'm not understanding. We have,
No.
it's a long, it's a couple of pages long, and we're supposed to be going through that. And we've identified some issues, and so, what am I missing here?
The committee so far,
Chair.
the years that it has been going on since the legislative gave this, have been looking at mainly number 3 here.
Yes,
The implementation of 94-F,
correct.
including the impact on education funding to local schools, district schools, and make recommendations for any legislative changes to the Education Freedom and Savings Accounts program. That's what we have been working in. Now, if
Yes.
we want to add something else, if we want to change it to look at every aspect of 194-F, then I think we need to set aside some time and go through it bit by bit and get it, every single thing in it.
I don't understand how the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194F doesn't mean look at all of 194F. The reason it says including the impact of state education funding to local schools is that impact of state education to local funding to local schools is not included as a section of 194F. So our charge to start with is to go through 194F, of which there are 12 parts. So I think I'm struggling with your saying we shouldn't go through it piece by piece when that's actually statutorily what we are asked to do. Not asked, nay, charged.
Okay, I have a suggestion to make, if that's the way you want to go. If you don't,
It's not how I want to go. I'm reading the statute. If you have a different reading, then please,
let me finish, please. If this is the way you see it, we have not done this before. We have gone with the implementation, just as I read to you, those charges. That's what we have been concentrating on. You are now adding the rest of the things in the F. And I think that we don't have time today, but if this is the way we should go, then I would suggest that we set aside a couple of days before November 30th and take a look at each one of them, and particularly some of the other things, and write it up. It's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of things back and forth, if this is the way we want to have the report. I don't see any other way. We can make a recommendation that we can accept this report with the changes that we made, make a recommendation that we need to look at all the other aspects of 194-F. And that will be the next thing to do. Or we can set up a couple of days where we go through it and have it ready for November 30th. I think we have that choice.
May I?
Representative?
Yeah, I chair a number of commissions, one of which is the Public School Infrastructure Commission. And 2 senators, 2 representatives, Director of Homeland Security, Commissioner of Education, and more are on that commission. And there's times when we often are dealing with issues which are confidential in nature, security issues within schools. That is not public. We go into a non-public session and discuss the issues there. They're never reflected in the minutes that are sealed to the public. I think that's a good thing. And I understand with the issue of when you're dealing with appeals of a parent, you're getting into confidential information. I understand the confidentiality of that and the need to go into non-public. But I also also am reading this statute, and I've had, I've looked at this many, many times, and this is one of the reasons why I brought it up on at the beginning, that I believe some of the things we're trying to do could be done by that advisory commission. But I also think the advisory commission has the responsibility for making those recommendations and how they're recommending maybe the implementation, the administration, and any possible improvements. That, I'd like to see those type of recommendations also being forwarded to the oversight committee, this one right here. So that we can see, we gotta work together on this. And I don't wanna see this committee become adversarial in nature. I think we gotta be ones that are working towards, because at the bottom line, we're talking students. We're talking, how can we best prepare those students for their futures? So if it is being done in a private manner, which is not available, and you're talking about a public program, and you're talking about possible recommendations to improve it or administer it, etc., I think unless there's something that's getting into personal information, I think that it should be public. And I'm not an attorney, and I'm not trying to give advice to the department, but I think that if by this possibly being a commission right now, which is very selective in nature and dealing with issues which are supposedly non-public, and I've been on city council elsewhere for a number of years, and I recognize when you're getting something from your public works director as a city manager, that's administrative in nature and perhaps is not ready for the public because the city manager is the one that's going to make that decision, or the city council. So there are some things which are not public in nature, but I believe there's a lot here that is public in nature and it should be available to this. In other words, we're not going to have to go beg somebody to get this information. It becomes available and it helps us do our job.
So, just to acknowledge, this is an advisory commission. This is a statutory advisory commission. And in New Hampshire, statutory advisory commissions are, have to be in accordance with right to know laws. They have to notice their meetings 24 hours before. They have to be in a public place. They have to be available to the public. This is not, this Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission is not abiding by the way we have advisory commissions set up in the state of New Hampshire. The only time that there is allowed to be in non-public is to go into, to move to go into non-public. So you gotta be public to be there in the first place. And it has to be personnel related or confidential. There needs to be there has to be a reason. And just because we don't feel like meeting in public is not a reason. Like 91A is not optional. This is an advisory commission, statutorily designed advisory commission. They don't have the option of not meeting in public, of not releasing their notes. So, since there seems to be some confusion on the part of the EFA Scholarship Fund about the implementation of this part of Section 194F5, a recommendation of tightening this part of the legislation up to make it crystal clear might be in order.
So we can add that to the recommendations.
Beautiful.
I think it'd be important that we address the chapter of law that was just mentioned and see how that's working and get back from the scholarship organization, how it may be implemented so as to really address, to be more informative to the public. I story, we need to work that out.
And that's why we contacted DOE as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So review and address other parts of 94-F.
194F:5. That's the Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission. Review and address the effectiveness of that particular group. Right? I think we can find the effectiveness of it. And there's 3 specific charges: administration, implementation, etc.
Okay. Are you all in agreement with that? Sound awesome.
Can we read that back to you?
Yes.
Write it down one more time?
Review and address the
Effectiveness.
effectiveness of RSA 194-F:5.
Yes, and I would add, since we've uncovered that they are not applying 91, they're not applying 91A, that, abide by the rules of 91A as designed by the legislature. I mean, it's a legislative, we have to clarify, because it's obviously not clear, so I think clarifying that this advisory commission is required by New Hampshire statute 91A to be in compliance with.
But that gives the reason for it.
Huh?
That gives the reason for it. But if we review.
You could
and
say the
address-
effectiveness in the process in which 194E:5 is being implemented. So if we want to look at the process, the procedure, how this is working.
Well, I think we've just uncovered that it's, that they hadn't been meeting. Apparently now they are meeting, but they are meeting out of compliance with 91A.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to say that in the recommendations.
But we need to recommend that they be in compliance with 91A. Like that 91A be referenced in recommendations, because it's a legislative recommendation.
Plus recommendations.
Sorry?
Review and address the effectiveness and process of 194-F:5 as being implemented.
Recommend.
And its compliance with 91A, is that what you want?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, like, yes, we should review that, we should look at that, but we should require, and perhaps, this is part of the recommendation for any legislative changes to the Education Freedom Savings Account Program. So the recommendation is to bring 194F:5 into compliance with RSA 91A. And we need to write that into the statute, as is written in many other places that must be in compliance with 91A.
And I don't agree with, we're making the assertion that it's, I don't want to get into a legal battle here.
What legal, but we're not, we're just
Well,
asking.
we're stating that something's not being followed.
It's not.
We need to look at the purpose of this section of law, the process, and how it's, and the process in which it's being implemented.
And if we find at that point,
Yes,
then it's not being implemented
then
the
we
way
go
it
for
should be, then we'll have some other recommendations.
So we identified that this advisory commission had not been meeting at the beginning of our work, and this is year 3 of this program. So statutorily, they were required to bring forward a parent and education service provider advisory commission, and they had very specific membership, has to be 7 members, parents of EFA students, no less than fewer counties represented, the director appoints them. It's very, very prescriptive. And none of that was done until this committee, doing its work, pointed out, hey, you're out of compliance with 194F:5. So we're going into year 3, and we are just now learning at the end of this committee's work that, yes, they have met, but they're not giving us minutes, they're not noticing their meetings, and that, how long do we let the slow walking of the implementation of 194 F5 go on? When statutorily, New Hampshire advisory boards are required to provide notice of meetings in accordance with New Hampshire's right to know. That's not swishy language. I mean, it's the law. And this is written pretty specifically, and it's being implemented really, really, really slowly. And so now we just want to say, hey, you might want to think about being in compliance with right to know. No, if it's unclear, let's put it in the statute. Like, you got to comply as every other advisory commission in the state of New Hampshire does. Like, why are we giving them a free pass or like just a little more time to figure out how to comply with 91A? Like, it's just, it seems giving, more room for this to just drag on. Like, just do it, get it done, show us the minutes, notice the meetings.
I like what we just did. We have added that we're gonna take a look at that and get it done. And I think this, not much is gonna change if we write it in a certain way today, or if we don't write it in a certain way today, because this report has to go out. It will be read, and from that, we can take some recommendations and then be ready to go. But as of right now, I think that review and address the effectiveness and process of RSA 194-F:5, how it's being implemented. That's what gives us a lot of things, because of some of the things we just learned today, we did not have some of the information. And to sit here with a report that is due on the 30th and add things and discuss things that just come to our attention today, I think is a little bit too much to ask.
Well, if we
put
know
it
that,
down,
we
future
have to,
recommendations.
you have to acknowledge what we know. I mean, when we know, we have to put it down. We can't pretend, well, we didn't know in time. We have plenty of time. It's only the 12th, and now we know. So we're not gonna know any less by the 30th.
No, but we have to figure out how to write it up. So,
And I think it's very simple to write this up, and I would write down the purpose, the effectiveness, and the process in which 194F:5 is being implemented, with a report to the Oversight Committee.
I agree with that one, so. Any other things that we need to discuss? Obviously, we have to make some corrections to the, additions to the report as is. And if anybody feels that this report, as written, does not address specific changes that we absolutely want to have in it, then I would suggest that that person or persons write minority report that will come together with this thing here, the report.
I'm getting the impression that you don't want us to have one unanimous report. You keep pushing us towards a minority report, and like.
It happens a lot of times in committees and commissions. You don't have it, if something is important enough, and not everybody agrees on the importance, then you write two reports, so that each side has an opportunity to state their case. And I think that's the fairest way of doing it. Now, you have some very specific things that you want that not necessarily I agree with, which is perfectly fine, and you should have that opportunity to address it.
Where can we come to an agreement on? Because these are open for discussion. They're not, I did not write a minority report. I wrote a memo.
But I have another meeting at 11:30. Unless you want to sit here for the next couple of hours, I have another meeting at 2. Then I don't see that we're going to get much further than we have gone right now. I don't see that we're going to get anywhere else. What specific things what specific things do you want to have in that isn't already in the report?
So in my memo,
Yep.
that I have some issues with transparency and oversight. And as of written, the minimal oversight by the Department of Education has led to a lack of transparent process for selecting approved providers by the scholarship organization, leading to several questionable choices for the pre-approved providers list. So, the commissioner allowing the scholarship organization to avoid a comprehensive audit by the legislature, as was required in House Bill 1135, which was signed in July 1st of 2022. It's now November of 2024, we still don't have that audit. So I would like that to be in the findings. Additionally, the ability to approve categories of educational expenses without any public oversight. Because they make their own rules. They're not part of the rulemaking process.
What you are doing right now,
Yes,
you're reading out of your memo, and
Yes.
as far as I can see, there's a lot of opinions. You know, this hasn't been done, this shouldn't be done, this
Yes.
wasn't done, this shouldn't be done.
not opinion,
And I-
fact. I backed it up, this fact,
That's
with
perfectly fine.
dates
That's perfectly
and
fine.
reference.
I would
Not my
ask
opinion.
you that you write a minority report and state all the different things. You can talk about the findings, you can talk about why you do not agree. The previous, we had a difference of opinion here, and a couple of my colleagues had a minority report, which is perfectly fine. I think people need to know that we don't always agree, and on there's some important issues to one person or to a group, that should be raised, and should be opened up, and should be transparent. So I still suggest that you write a minority report and state everything that didn't get in. We got a couple of things in here which I think will add to it, and we'll have to rewrite it and add it, and then we have to come together before and to go through it, that we have the report and they bring in the minority report.
I hear you, and it is clear that that is the wish of the chair, and so we will fulfill that wish. And in getting back to your own report that you put forward this morning, I am noticing in the implementations of education freedom accounts section, there is no accounting of the students. For instance, there's a lot of accounting of, how many students are in the program. You've picked out Manchester, Ackworth, Madbury, Plainfield, and Wentworth specifically for mention. 2,000 of the students are from families that are eligible for free and reduced lunch programs, 377 for special education students. What's missing is that over 70% of the EFA students have never accessed any form of public education. So I think that needs to be outcome in the report, because we are, looking at how these students impact the program. So we're talking about where they're coming from, and then we need to also mention the switchback students. Those are also not accounted
I
for.
think there are in your, don't you have more information in your packet?
Where is the one you just gave us this morning?
In the back?
It's not mentioned in the report. That's what I'm saying. It may, like we mentioned, we would do a footnote in the minutes.
But if you write a report and you refer it, there are footnotes with the information.
I know, I'm asking why you did not include it in your report. Like what? The number of students who access the EFA program who never use the public school program, where we're accounting for those. That is a number that we need to account for in the report. It may be reflected in, the reference materials, but to bring it forward into the report, and then if you want to footnote where it's located, great, but it needs to be accounted for.
I mean, having collected data
Yes.
on each child who never attended public school but went into a other school and asked for EFA. That's what you want?
Yes, who went specifically straight to the EFA program, who bypassed the public schools altogether.
Well, do you think that makes a difference?
Well, we are marking out,
Why should they attend? Why should they have to attend public school?
I didn't say they should, I said it is a number that we need to account for.
Do we?
We do, we have those numbers,
We
and,
have-
well, if you're gonna parse out EFA enrollment, how many of those students are free and reduced lunch? How many are special education?
Yep.
We should also be accounting for how many have never entered into the public program in the first place. I think specifically because in our program overview, we have all agreed that when this program came to pass, the impetus for the program was for parents to have an alternative choice, low-income parents to have an alternative choice from brick and mortar public schools, public charter schools, or VLACs. We account for how many students are in each of those three categories when we're accounting for EFAs. Because our charge in the beginning, what we said was, well, those three spaces are not adequate for some families. We want to provide a fourth option. We should be accounting for those numbers. It's just adding another column to your chart that's on page 2 of the report.
I'm looking here, Department of Education, Amendment 9.
I'm looking right here, this one.
I'm looking at
This
this,
chart.
I'm looking here,
Okay.
and seeing all the different
What page is
towns, a number of EFA students, and how many free and reduced lunches, and how many special education and English learners, so that,
Yeah.
the information is here. We have it.
Yeah, and so adding in how many have not used the public schools and how many have come back, like those are our numbers that we also have. I'm just saying we should put them in the content of the report.
Well,
I mean, those have been reported out to us here multiple
I
times.
find sometimes you have a basic report and then you have appendices and people can look it up, the information, because to have pages and pages and pages of specific things, when you already have all it written down somewhere else. As long as it's part of the report.
It's another section on this chart that you've already included to add another piece to the chart. It's not pages and pages. It's
What?
right here,
Yeah, what is it?
adding in here.
What do you want in there?
Students who have not used other public options. This is a new public option where we are evaluating how this public option is implemented. So accounting for the students who are taking advantage of the new public option without having used any other three public options is something we talked about a lot in this committee. And reflecting it in your chart is just it's just another quarter inch of the, this, I think it's a
I'm still thinking, how long is it gonna take to find that information? And the report is due November 30th,
Give me an hour.
okay?
Great.
You can put that in your,
I'm asking to put it in the implementation of
Okay.
education freedom counts for the general report. I'm trying to get to consensus.
I'm sorry that it's come to this point. It seems like a discussion back and forth and arguing.
Yes, it's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah,
Because
why
I
can't we
can't-
just try to get to consensus?
I don't understand why it is so important to find that out. I don't understand it. If this is something that you wanna have done, and you think this is a huge addition, something that's the size of the EFA program, I'd be happy to have you look it up. And send it to me, email or whatever, and we'll put it in,
Excellent. I will send that to you for
okay? Put these one at a
inclusion
time.
and we're not putting all the towns out here. It's just an old number.
Okay, fine.
That's it. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay. When do you want to meet next?
All right.
It's not
Calendar
done. I
time.
am gone for the rest of the week to a conference. So it's gonna be next week sometime.
Next week? Good.
That's the only option we have.
Oh, she returned.
It's the 18th on Monday or something like that. And I don't even have my schedule here, but we'll work it out. give me a couple of options, either that or can have Aaron send up.
A doodle poll, can Aaron do a doodle poll? What? Can Aaron do a doodle poll?
Where he could probably do that.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay. But I think we have to do that next week, so we can
Yeah,
finish it up.
wrap it up.
Yes.
On the 18th, in the morning, I can't, I got career technical education council meeting.
Yeah, I have a lot of these.
19th through the 21st, we're dealing with orientation for new representatives here, and I'm very busy on every one of those days.
Okay.
22nd, which is Friday, I was hoping that was the day that my wife and I could have some time, have to be
Well, why don't have Aaron send it out, and we can just send ourselves first, and do the real. And I want
Of course, then the next week, we're starting to slide into Thanksgiving.
I know.
25th is Monday,